Hello. No, it's working. Okay, sorry. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for waiting. We had some technical problems. I want to say a warm welcome to everybody of you, to the journalists and media. Thank you for attending this early hours this Tuesday morning, and also a warm welcome to organizations and institutions and the diplomatic community. I'm very glad that some of you can attend this press conference this morning. We are the European Union Election Observation Mission. We are back. This is our return visit for 1 week. And today we want to present our final report together with some recommendations. My name is René Schulthoff. I'm the press officer of the mission. Some of you know me already. I want to introduce my colleagues here on the table. Next to me is our election analyst, Marcela Mašková. We have another woman in the team. It's our political analyst, Kari Vik. Then there is our team leader for this return visit and our political expert, Maros Gabriel, and last but not least, our chief observer, Andreas Schieder. He is member of the European Parliament from Austria. A few words regarding how it works, this press conference this morning. Mr. Schieder, our chief observer, will present our final report and talk about some recommendations. After that, I would like to give the floor to the journalists. If you have questions, we have a microphone. My colleague Clara will assist you with a microphone, and you can ask your questions and we try to answer them. We have some printed copies of this final report, only a few. I would suggest who doesn't need really a printed copy, you will get it as a PDF file anyway. We have also prepared a press release. We will deliver it also after the press conference outside. And I will send you an email after this press conference with all the details and where you can download all the files. Furthermore, at the end of the conference, we want to invite the journalists to a small late breakfast this morning. You are invited. We can have a chat a little bit more. Now I want to ask you to please switch off your mobile phones or minimum on silent mode, and I would like to give the floor to Chief Observer Andreas Schieder.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our final press conference. We are going to present today the final report of the EU Election Observation Mission. And the purpose of the EOM return visit, which is now 3 months after the election, is not only to present the final report, but primarily also to start a new discussion with our Liberian counterparts on how to improve the election process further. And therefore, I would like to, above all, also concentrate today on our recommendation, which are explained in detail and attached to the report. And I would add that as of today, the EU EOM final report will be also a public document, as René already mentioned, accessible also on our EU election observation web page, and I think this is a good document for everybody. But let me go back and thank the Liberian government and also the National Election Commission, NEC, for inviting us to observe these important 2023 elections. And let me also thank the Liberian authorities and other election stakeholders like political parties, representatives of civil society, and also the representatives of media present here for a good cooperation through the long election period. The EU Election Observation Mission was present here from 27th of August to the 10th of December 2023, so more or less half a year. And the mission's mandate was to observe all aspects of the electoral process and assess the extent to which the elections complied with regional and international commitments for election, as well as with national legislation. The EU Election Observation Mission comprised a core team of 10 experts based here in Monrovia, and in total the EOM deployed more than 100 observers from all 27 EU member states, as well as from partner countries like Canada and Norway, observing in all 15 counties of Liberia. So let me talk shortly about the mission's final report. First, there are some, and I think this is the most important, positive aspects. The electoral campaign was vibrant and largely peaceful, although some isolated violent incidents occurred, most notably those in Lofa and Montserrat countries. The campaign freedoms were mostly respected. Freedom of expression and of the press was respected in Liberia. And despite all logistical, financial and operational challenges, also the National Election Commission delivered a successful elections. All permanent as well as temporary NEC personnel involved in the election preparation showed strong determination to ensure that as many Liberian voters as possible were able to cast their ballots in these elections. And speaking about the Liberian people also, the Liberian people demonstrated their commitment to the exercise of democracy, which was reflected in a high turnout recorded during both election days. And so the overall is to congratulate, let's say, Liberia, meaning the voters, meaning the authorities, meaning the National Election Committee, also to conducted very good elections, and also therefore being able to organize a very smooth transition process of political power. But of course, we are election observers, so we have also to look where things did not went so well. So there are also some negative aspects, which are the EOM observed a widespread use of state resources during the campaign. It was observed all over Liberia and took the form of government institutions and staff campaigning for the incumbent, and government property and buildings being used for campaign purposes. The EOM also observed significant problems with candidates and parties' adherence to campaign financial regulations. The lack of enforcement of campaign finance regulations and the absence of the ombudsman, who should oversee the code of conduct of all public officials and employees of the government of Liberia, resulted also in an uneven level playing field. Political will to address corruption and to enforce campaign finance regulation is paramount to ensure equality, transparency and accountability in future elections. And we have to say also that the representation of women in politics is very low in Liberia and did not improve with these elections. Despite a soft quota in the new election law and a voluntary commitment by the political parties to ensure at least 30% of women on their candidates' lists, only 15.5% of the candidates were women. And around 10% of the newly elected legislators are women. So I want to talk now about a little bit concrete about our recommendations. We have to say, and you find it in the report, we made 22 recommendations to improve the way elections are conducted in Liberia, but we also, let's say, summarized these 22 recommendations into 6 priority recommendations. And the mission's first recommendation is to focus on the overall legal framework regulating the conduct of elections in Liberia. It is essential to have clear rules which shape the electoral process and guarantee to all involved fair and equal treatment all the way. And while the Liberian legal framework provides a reasonable basis for the conduct of democratic elections, it is characterized by shortcomings in various areas, such as criteria of establishment of political party, requirement for registrations for candidates, or formal limitations for the right to seek effective legal remedy. Second, the mission recommends the state authorities to provide the NEC with requisite and timely allocated financial resources, which would correspond to its legal and operational responsibility and would ensure its necessary independence and efficiency. Third, some voters might have been discouraged by long distances to registration centers and cumbersome procedures for corrections of their data. The mission therefore recommends to further decentralize the whole voter registration process and increase the number of registration centers to enhance voters' participation in the process. Number 4, democracy needs political will to fight corruption and to enforce campaign financial regulation is paramount to ensure equality, transparency, and also to ensure accountability in future elections. In order to achieve this, the EU recommends to empower the NEC through enhanced resources and capacity to enforce the campaign financial regulations and to make the operational the Office of the Ombudsman as established in the Code of Conduct Law of 2014 already, to effectively monitor and sanction abuse of state resources during electoral campaign. Fifth, as mentioned also before, there is no democracy without women. So women need to be equally represented in politics, both so their interests are represented and protected, but also for a country to prosper. Liberia has a history of being a front runner in this area, being the first country in Africa that had an elected woman as president. But besides this achievement, the share of women in the Liberian legislature has decreased since the 2005 elections. Adopt gender quotas to achieve this gender equality in the legislation is our recommendation, but also to have a more holistic approach on women's participation. And sixth, the mission suggests to assign court magistrates who would receive proper training and electoral dispute resolution to ensure expedient manner of adjudication of the election complaints and to increase public trust in the process. So I want to say again, and I think this is very important, that we had been here for a long period and have seen quite good elections, but we also prepared, of course, a long report with a long recommendation, but we have to say really congratulations for how these elections had been organized. So from the elections to the future, so ladies and gentlemen, the question is what will happen now? And we already had meetings with the new President Boakai, with the new Minister for Foreign Affairs, Sara Nianti, and the NEC leadership under the leadership of Davidetta Lassona. And today and in the upcoming days also we have more appointments with ministers, political parties, government and opposition, civil society groups and other stakeholders. And this is, I think, is very important to discuss with everybody also our report and our recommendations. The mission looks forward to discussing this recommendation with several Liberian stakeholders in detail and to prospect for the implementation during the upcoming roundtable event. Finally, it is up to the Liberian authorities and stakeholders to consider these recommendations. Our recommendations are not a fixed law, but these are suggestions and recommendations which should be implemented, and now it's up to Liberian politics, meaning the government, but also the parliament and the houses of representatives and all political parties to work on these recommendations. The EOM final report is a comprehensive assessment of the entire electoral process that builds up in the initial findings of the preliminary statements which were issued shortly after both rounds of the presidential elections, which you also witnesses. So I want to say, as we had a general positive assessment of this election, it is also, especially when our recommendations are taken into account, Liberia has also the possibility to be a shining positive example for this area, which had been with the elections, which had been also with historic steps like the first women elected, but could be even more for the future, also in democratic processes. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention and for attending the press conference, and thank you also for the cooperation through the last months during the electoral process.
Thank you very much, Chief Observer Andreas Schieder. It was a lot of information. It's like always when we give a press conference, you get it all at once. Probably you have to think about it, read all this material. But journalists, if you have questions, we try to answer your questions. Clara is there with a microphone. Please tell us your name and the media you are working for and your question, and we will try to answer. Please.
Good morning. My name is Cecilia Glitley-Clark, and I work for the Liberia Broadcasting System, LNTV, ELBC. My interest is in the 6th recommendation. May I ask what triggered that recommendation, the 6th recommendation, related to the training of magistrates to enhance their capacity? Or did he at any time along the way notice anything that maybe they were not real trained? My interest is in that 6th recommendation. What triggered that recommendation? Thank you so much.
Maybe we will answer your questions, or you want to do you want to collect some questions?
It depends how many are, but we can answer also.
Yeah. Okay.
So, in general, and I want to ask you also to the 6, and then when you look at our 22 recommendations, maybe to say also this, it is part of them has to be implemented by law. Part of them is simply an organizational issue, or can be implemented by the administration or by the NEC. I think this is important. Not everything has to pass the parliament. A lot of things can be also done. And it has to be seen, the training also with this question of resources of the NEC, because it is to provide those which have to conduct the election with adequate resourcing is a question which, when it started now, and not only before the election, it is an easier process, and the same counts for the training, for the magistrates and those which have to do and to deal with all these issues. Therefore, we are asking to do this, because we have seen some shortcomings in the area, and a better training, I think, would be good, because what we also saw is there is a will, but sometimes, of course, there were complaints. But maybe Marcella can give you more details.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning from my side as well. I will try to provide a bit. Your question was what triggers this recommendation. To put more detail what the recommendation is about, it is to rather second a court magistrate, to adjudication of the complaints. While now the NEC hired several hearing officers who were legal professionals. However, what we have seen that due to the training was cut. So given the fact that there are also some loopholes in the legislation, there are some ambiguities, some contradictions, we have seen that the law sometimes have been applied incoherently. Sometimes the cases were remanded back to the hearing officers by the Board of Commissioners, given that the law was not implemented correctly. So therefore, we would suggest to provide complaints and so that they understand the process correctly and the law coherently. It is also connected with our first priority recommendation to actually focus on a holistic review of the legal framework so that there are these loopholes, ambiguities are properly addressed, and those who are implementing provisions can understand them properly.
Good morning. My name is Edward Colley and I work for the Association of Liberia Community Radio. And you talk about the gender parity bill that talk about women, 30% women representation, which wasn't followed in this going election. If you look at the number of women in that one election from 2005 up to this present, it also declined. So what else does the EU propose Liberia can do in ensuring that political parties comply, that during elections, the 30% women representation should be held?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we can maybe also go a little bit deeper into this issue. Because what we see is that the system as it is now shows a good will, but at the end, will is not, let's say, realized in the sense of it's not implemented. So parties themselves, and I think it counts for every party in the country, agreed to have a higher quota than they realized at the end, having women on the list. And we're knowing also that the electoral system here is not favoring an equal distribution, because the list itself is not only the question is also on who is on the head of list. And the second question is also the question of resources. Resourcing meaning resources to run a campaign, to get visibility, to be able to travel around, to be able to have leaflets, t-shirts, posters, and things like this, and also to have access to media and social media. I think these are important points which have to be discussed. But I can also ask Kati, who worked on this field, to elaborate a little bit more on this.
Thank you. So first I would like to say that we don't recommend the 30% gender quota, but we do recommend gender quota to achieve gender parity, which in my opinion is 50%. But we don't talk about numbers in that way. This particular recommendation is done knowing the context of Liberia, that you already have a soft quota in the legislation with a kind of soft wording that has not worked until now, and also voluntary commitments by parties to have at least 30% candidates have not worked until now. We also know there was a bill that was passed by the previous legislator, but that was not finally signed into law. And so this proposal is, stemming directly from that. But in order for your other question on how to, what would be the sort of holistic approach to women, then yes, what we saw from our meetings with female candidates is that the major obstacles they face is problems with funding their campaign, intimidation, they don't feel safe while campaigning, they can be bullied, they can be harassed, also physically harassed. And this is like a cultural issue to tackle. But we would strongly see for parties, party structures to support their women more, because it's essential for women within the parties to have like a real career prospects, to actually have powers of positions of power, to sort of climb the ladder. They need the parties to support them.
Good. Thank you, Kari. Thank you, Marcella. And thank you, Andreas. It seems there are not so many questions at the moment. That is good. Please feel free to read our final report and the recommendations. I want to close the press conference. Thank you for attending. You will get some printed final reports at the exit, and also the press release. It's with me. Come to me, please. I will give it to you. And if you have the time, please join us on the terrace up here for a small snack, late breakfast, and to have a chat maybe a little bit. Thank you very much for attending, and all the best for you.